Early 2026 delivered a massive systemic shock to the physical global economy. Brent crude oil broke out of its normal trading patterns, breaking past $100 a barrel and causing massive seizures in international supply chains. The International Monetary Fund responded by immediately cutting global economic growth projections down to 3.1%. This sudden global market crash originated far from the banking sector, following a total breakdown of geopolitics in the Middle East. The path to war was finalized in Islamabad. Negotiators attempted to find a diplomatic off-ramp, but the talks stalled permanently. Iranian officials pointed to the United States continually changing its stance, bringing forward extreme, inflexible demands that killed any chance of a negotiated settlement. Behind those failed talks was a deep underlying anxiety. The US and its allies believed Iran was crossing the threshold to produce functional nuclear weapons, a fear severe enough that it had already triggered preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear infrastructure in 2025. Add to this a heavy political pressure campaign. Israel actively lobbied Washington for a decisive military blow to eliminate their most capable regional rival. The toxic combination of diplomatic deadlock and escalating nuclear paranoia perfectly set the stage for a major military clash. The kinetic phase began on February 28, 2026. A massive joint military operation by the US and Israel illuminated the sky, moving the conflict from closed-door threats to open warfare. Iran immediately pushed the battlefield out to sea, openly targeting US warships patrolling the region. But their ultimate leverage was geographical. Iran threatened to completely close off the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping. This bottleneck shows the scale of the vulnerability. A full 20% of the world's daily oil supply is forced through this single 21-mile stretch of water. The physical blockade forced massive cargo ships into complex, expensive detours. At the same time, war risk insurance premiums for vessels operating near the region exploded in cost. The pain quickly moved from the ocean to the sky. As airspace closed down to avoid the conflict zone, the price of jet fuel essentially doubled, which drove passenger airfares up by 5 to 10%. A secondary, silent crisis emerged almost immediately. The Middle East is a massive exporter of fertilizers and petrochemicals. When those stopped flowing out of these facilities, global food security was directly threatened. By weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz, Iran turned a regional defense tactic into a systemic attack on the logistical arteries that sustained the global economy. By mid-April 2026, a draft ceasefire plan emerged. The markets exhaled slightly, allowing crude oil prices to dip into the $94 to $97 range. Energy analysts warned against celebrating. The physical pipelines and processing facilities took significant structural damage during the conflict. Because of that physical destruction, crude oil is highly unlikely to return below $70 a barrel anytime soon. This chart shows the wider macroeconomic threat. While the IMF initially projected a 3.1% global growth rate, prolonged instability introduces a sharply diverging risk. If the conflict drags on, global GDP could contract by an additional 0.9 percentage points by the fourth quarter. Signing a piece of paper in April might pause the shooting, but it cannot instantly rebuild destroyed physical infrastructure or restore shattered investor confidence. To understand the true scale of this, we have to look past the global averages and examine a specific local economy. Malaysia serves as a perfect case study. Malaysia actually exports oil, which sounds like an advantage. Instead, it created a fiscal trap. The Malaysian government heavily subsidizes domestic RON 95 petrol. When global crude prices spiked, maintaining that artificial price at the pump became a crushing financial burden for the state. At the exact same time, geopolitical panic prompted foreign investors to pull their capital out of emerging markets. That massive flight of money directly weakened the value of the Malaysian ringgit. The government bled cash to maintain cheap fuel, while a devalued currency made importing everyday goods significantly more expensive. This combination directly drove up the daily cost of living for citizens. In an era of hyper-connected supply chains, isolation is impossible. A missile fired in the Middle East inescapably detonates inside the wallets of citizens worldwide.